Well, we are Steve and Lauri Hawley, as the video said. We are Snemen missionaries to the outdoor community and founders of Hiker Church.
The video also told you a lot. Well, actually, you introduced us very well. We have 3 children. One of those children is Christina O'Connor now, married to Noah O'Connor. They were both graduates of Northpoint. So we are honored to be sharing with you today. Oh, and we've been married for 30 years this coming March.
Testament that miracles can happen. Anyway, today my personality says I just want to have a conversation. I'm not here to preach at you or to you. Hopefully just share with you our story and what we're doing. And hopefully that God will use that to prick your own heart or clarify some things for you or help you on your journey for serving the Lord. So I received the pastoral or ministry calling early in life when I was a junior in high school. Ran from that calling, didn't really want to do ministry because I equated that with being poor. And I had grown up poor, and I just didn't want to be that the rest of my life. And so I worked a full-time job, just pursuing, I still was in church, still serving Jesus, just me, just not ministry. And to my early 30s, I worked a full-time job. But as somebody said, I can't remember if it's the video or the intro, but I've served in multiple capacities. I've children's pastor, youth pastor, associate pastor, and now most recently lead pastor for a little over 16 years. And I learned something, which hopefully, if you've held that many different roles and ministered for a while, hopefully you'll learn a few things. And I think the thing I learned the most is that I went into ministry because I loved Jesus, and I had a little bit of a gifting and skill set that I could use for Jesus. But I discovered that it was not enough to be gifted and to love Jesus. I found out that you have to love people too. And it's super, super important because if you don't love people, you will end up using them as a resource to accomplish goals that you think are from the Lord, but they really just feed your ego or soothe your insecurities. I'm guilty of it. I'm not standing here telling you like, oh, we're human. We have this piece in us called sin that is with us the rest of our lives until eternity, and we spend a lifetime of killing that old self and pursuing Jesus, but if left unchecked, it does rear its ugly head. And so you have to love people to be in ministry long term. So I just encourage you and challenge you in that way. But I started backpacking in 2015 and fell in love with the sport and with the hiking community. Most of you are probably involved in some sort of community outside of Northpoint, right? Like you're a gamer, or you're a sports person, or you're, like me, a hiker, or something, and you have another community that you really just, it has its own interesting set of parameters that call it a community, right? And I just fell in love with a hiking community. And as was stated earlier in that time, I've hiked all over the world, the 800 miles of the Appalachian Trail, which next year I'm scheduled to do the entire 2,200 miles from Georgia to Maine, which will be awesome. I am actually looking forward to it. Some of you are like, what? Hiked all over New Hampshire, Vermont, all over the Northeast. I've hiked the Salcantay Pass in Peru, which goes up to an elevation of 15,100 feet, and many smaller mountains around the country. But by 2023, we'd become aware, as the video said, of ministry on the trail, the openness of those in that community that are searching, especially the long-distance hiker who's hiking 2,000 miles at a time or more. They're just searching. They're looking to be changed. and we discovered like their welcoming of spiritual conversation. So by 2023, I was aware of ministry potential and had fallen in love with the hiking community. And after much prayer and confirmation from God, I resigned this year. January 28th was my last Sunday at our church in Hyannis, and we gave our lives to ministering to the outdoor community, especially the hiker. And so one of those confirmations was our house, which the video touched on, but I'm going to let Lauri say a little bit more about it.
So as Steve is falling in love with the whole hiking community and wondering, God, how am I going to minister to them? We live on Cape Cod. It takes 4 hours to drive to the mountains where they are. That's like, we need a spot where we can keep all of the stuff that we're going to minister with, all the supplies and the equipment. So he's looking for houses along the Appalachian Trail where he can buy, and that can be his staging point, okay? Well, 2 years of looking on Zillow. I was getting there. So he's looking on Zillow, and there are only 80 houses on the trail in Massachusetts that exist. Okay, so how many of them are going to go up for sale? No idea. So we looked at a couple of them. They didn't quite meet what we needed. My dad lives with us, so I'm his caregiver. He needs a first floor bedroom and a first floor bathroom. That right there crosses off a bunch of those 80 houses. We needed a yard that was big enough for hikers to tent in on their way through town. That crosses a bunch more houses off. We needed a huge dining room because we wanted to serve hikers around our dining room table. Come over for supper on your way through town. Well, the day that we agreed, God had confirmed, okay, yes, this is the step you're going to take. That is the same day that this house went on the market. The same day. God knows the perfect time for his plans. When you're wondering, God, how on earth are we going to get from here to there? He's like, don't worry, I gotcha. One step at a time. So this house, not only did it have everything that we were looking for, there was more. There's a state forest in the backyard. We can just walk out the backyard and keep walking for how many miles till we hit a road? 18 miles of forest. There's a large patio that we can host hikers. We had hikers sitting around a table on our patio, like for a 4th of July barbecue. Something about me, I love flowers, but I'm not really good at planting them. This house has a huge flower garden, and they pop up all on their own. I don't have to plant them. It's already set. So God knows even the little details. And we have mountains within walking distance that he can climb as much as he wants.
Which is weekly, by the way. I mean, every week I go on a hike somewhere. So let's jump into what is Hiker Church? Like, what is it that we're seeking to do? And, all over the world, people engage in outdoor activities. And they do this to find adventure, to find recreation, to find rest, to find peace, to find community. How many of you, I know some of you do, how many of you love some sort of outdoor activity and maybe do it on a semi-regular basis? Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. When you're out there and you're doing whatever it is, fishing or canoeing or hiking or whatever it is, man, there's just something about being outdoors that speaks to you. If something inside here is like, yeah, this is great. And so because of that, a lot of the folks that we engage with are not likely to be interested in participating in a traditional church. So even with an invitation like, hey, we become friends, you want to come to church? Oh, on Sunday? No, I hike then, or I fish then, or I do this then. And they're just not interested because they're getting what they need outdoors already. They're not searching for any of that. So here's the thing, because of that, the gospel has to be taken to the outdoor places. And that was one of the things that God gripped my heart with as I was pastoring a traditional church, which is nothing wrong with a traditional church. And hopefully you never get that impression from me when in anything that we say here today. But for the over half the population who are not interested, I can't be okay with that. And I don't think God's okay with that. We can't just be like, hey, we've created this for you to know Jesus, and you're not interested, so oh well, we did our part. Too bad. Like something in our spirit has to say, no, 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 no. If they're not going to come, I have to go, right? And so, again, because it's the love component, right? You got to love people. If you don't love people, if you just love Jesus and you just love your skill set, the come and see thing you build is fine. That'll be enough to feed you, but it won't minister to people. Anyway, so we are working to create a community of people, as we said on the video, that are brought together by their love of the outdoors and Jesus Christ. And so this requires us knowing people. And so loving people and being committed to the long game. And it's not a game, it's just an expression, but there's something I grew up with anyway, I won't put it on anybody else, and within the Christianity I grew up into was like, hey, we really weren't long game kind of people. If we did big events, we did this, and you didn't respond, oh, well, we're moving on. Right? I preached the gospel, you didn't respond, you heard it, it's on you now, see ya. Right? And this community's different. This community's like, yeah, we've seen all of that, we're not interested. And so we have to love people for the long haul. And for in the hiking community, we have to ask the question, what does love look like? And not again, if any of you have and been in relationships, if you've read the love languages and those kinds of things, we typically give love in the way that we receive it. But for someone to truly feel loved, you have to demonstrate love in the way that they receive it. So it doesn't matter what I think, it matters how they feel loved. And so for the long-distance hiker, that's food. Right? There's a lot of cultures that say amen with that, like food, yeah, but when somebody is burning 7,000 calories a day and they have to carry all their food on their back, it takes about 300 miles of walking, and they have what they call hiker hunger. Like, you don't understand it if you've never been there. It's like fasting for 40 days. You're so hungry, you would eat the bark off of a tree. And then you can eat a full meal and still be hungry. It is why they have something called the half-gallon challenge, where at the halfway point in the Appalachian Trail, they go in and you try to eat a half-gallon of ice cream in under an hour. And it's why 90-pound women can beat that challenge and still be hungry and go out for a burger later. It's just a bottomless pit. And so when they walk up and you have good food and you're like, hey, you want some tacos? You want some burger? They're like, I love you instantly. And so we feed them really good food. And then the second thing we do is we listen to their stories. Because you and I both know that in a social media influencer-driven society, everyone is talking, but nobody's listening. Everybody wants to have their message heard, right? And they do all kinds of crazy things to get you to listen to their message. I mean, I can't stand flipping through social media anymore because it's so full of advertisements and agendas and trying to get me to listen. I just want to see my friends' posts. Dear God. But what we find is when you sit down and you ask them to share their story and then you just listen, people feel loved. Like, tell me about yourself. And then you don't interrupt. And then you ask clarifying questions like, really? What led you to do that? And you just listen. And people, you feed them well and you listen. And the hiking community is you now are best friends. You're now best friends. So we build authentic relationships. What do I mean by authentic? And hear my heart in this. By authentic, I mean they have to know that I will be their friend even if they say no to Jesus. If they don't know that, it's not an authentic relationship. You're using them. You're only using them to introduce them to Jesus. And if they're not doing what you want them to do, you're not going to be their friend? The society can pick up on that in a heartbeat. And so it takes time to build authentic relationships. You know, I'm your friend regardless of the journey you go on. Because remember, we're not talking about the change now. We're talking about the long haul. Like, I'm content to walk alongside you for the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years until you say yes to Jesus. And so in your own heart, you have to say, I'm their friend regardless. I'm going to love them regardless. I'm going to serve them regardless, even if they're far from Jesus. And that's powerful. It takes a lot of work. So that's what we do. We build authentic relationships. We do this by entering their environment instead of trying to get them to come to our environment. We enter their environment and we reflect Christ. I heard it in the worship time or the prayer time about being ambassadors, about reflecting Jesus Christ. And sometimes, we come together in traditional church or in Bible school settings or worship services like believers, and we get energized and we encourage one another with hymns and psalms and prayers, and that's important. It fuels our tank so that we can step into a space where there is no representation of Jesus Christ, and we can still reflect him without that darkness overtaking us. Because here's the reality. The Jesus that most hikers the Christianity that most hikers think about is a Christianity that is either politicized, some grand performance, or just a dead religion that has no relevance to them. Most of them have never introduced and know the life-giving, life-transforming Jesus Christ. And so they see these things from afar and they go, I don't really want anything to do with that. So when they meet somebody who's authentic, who's coming into their space, who's loving them and being their friend, but living fully for Jesus, man, they become all ears. And for some it takes a while, and sometimes it's a short period of time. So we meet them wherever they are. Sometimes that's on mountaintops. Sometimes that's in living rooms. Sometimes that is on the trail somewhere or in a state park at a picnic area, or it's online. Doesn't matter. We go wherever they are. So we're going to share just a couple of testimonies about the long haul and the approach. So
We had a local friend who texted us one night and said, there's a hiker or two coming down the mountain. Can they stay with you tonight? And I was like, absolutely, send them on over. So 2 hikers came over for dinner. We fed them dinner. They camped out in the backyard. We fed them breakfast before they got back on the trail. Well, one of them was from South Carolina, and wouldn't you know, we used to live in South Carolina, so we had heard of her little itty-bitty town. She was like, whoa, nobody ever knows about my town. So we had a little connection there. Dinner conversation, breakfast conversation, it stayed pretty, surface level, nothing seriously deep. Well, we connected on social media. She's a blogger. She had her hike up on social media. So every now and then I keep the conversation open. And there's something called hiker blues. It hits hikers after they've completed their long hike of 2,000 plus miles because they have reached a goal. And now what? What am I supposed to do with my life now? And it's very common. So just to have someone else know that there's someone else out there who cares. So we talked a little bit about that. And then she got a puppy. So now we're connecting over her little puppy. She loved our dog when she was with us. So just keeping those connections open, keeping the conversation going so that they can always come back and connect with us later when they have problems or needs or questions. Just know that we're there.
Which I thought was hysterical because you should never get a puppy when you're depressed because that's like a 12 to 15-year commitment. So you should call a friend before you adopt a puppy. Anyway, for me, not this past summer, but the summer before, we traveled down to Virginia, and there's a festival they call Trail Days. And this little town of about, 2,000 people gets overrun with about 10 to 14,000 hikers. And it's a crazy festival celebrating the hiking community, and everything you can think about when you think of festivals is there. And so we go down just to be a part and learn and meet hikers. And so we were outside of town feeding hikers as they were hiking into the festival. And we fed so many hikers a day. It was well over 100. We just had our head down making food. And we ended up feeding this pair of hikers that were coming through. At that point, I didn't remember them at all. But I'm in New Hampshire, and I'm set up with my stuff, and I'm feeding hikers at a trail crossing somewhere out near Mount Moosilauke. And I decided to take a little hike, and I run into this pair of hikers, and they're like, "It's you." And I'm like, "It's me. I don't know who you are, but you know who I am." And like, no, you fed us down in Virginia. And I was like, "I did?" And they said, "Yeah." And they turned, and on their part of their backpack was our sticker, our hiker church sticker. And I was like, "That's so awesome." So we sat in the trail and we chatted for a while. Neither one of them are believers. They're aware of religion. One of them is a yoga instructor, but not just the art of yoga, the whole meditation part of it, and just, I don't know what religion that is, but fully into that scene. And so we have this great conversation, and then later on, I connect them with a mother who wanted to thank them and all these kinds of things. So there was a connection point there. Then later in that year, as they hiked through where we were living in North Adams, I gave them a ride to resupply, because sometimes after you've walked all day, at the end of the day, you really don't want to walk 5 miles round trip to the grocery store to buy groceries. So, I mean, that's another love language thing. Like, "Hey, I'll give you a ride." Like, "Oh, thanks, my feet are sore." Give them a ride. We're having great conversation. The guy in the hiking pair, they're not a couple, but they're just a guy and a girl who are hiking together. He begins to open up to me as we're walking around the grocery store about his life as a firefighter and the PTSD he had because of seeing certain things, and that's why he's hiking the trail. And now, granted, this is our fourth connection, and he's just starting to tell me his story, his real story, not the surface story. And so I said, "Man, I'll be praying for you," those kinds of things. They move on. And now this year, we go back down to trail days and seeing hikers and whatnot, and I run into them again. And they're like, "Oh, we can't believe you're here, big hugs, hanging out, high fives, so good to see you, touching base," that kind of thing. He's telling me like, "Man, I got a new job, I'm working in this," I'm celebrating with him. And then over the summertime, I was on a hike in New Hampshire, but I had to speak at a church. And so I said, "You know what, I'll just stay at a local hostel instead of paying for a hotel room," because you guys know what hostels are? Yeah, it's great. For $40, you can sleep in a bunk bed instead of paying $150 or $200 for your own room. Anyway, I digress. So I go to this hostel, and the girl who's the yoga instructor and whatnot, she's working at the hostel. And so she sees me, she's like, "Oh, I can't believe it's so great. Yeah, you're working here. Yeah, touch base." And she's like, "Hey, I get off work in like 45 minutes. Would you have a few minutes?" "I absolutely do." So 45 minutes later, I make myself present, and then we find a quiet place to chat. And after a little bit of small talk, she opens up and she's like, "Hey, my dad has some medical conditions, and I'm really, really concerned for his life. And I don't know what to do. Would you pray for my dad?" And I said, "Sure, if you let me pray right now." And we held hands, and we asked the Lord Jesus Christ to help her dad. Somebody who's far from God, who took us 5 personal touches of being in their life before now they're asking, would your God, would Jesus Christ, like, I don't know what else to do, would you pray for him that your God would heal him? And so that conversation and those relationships are ongoing. And so, but granted, it's 18 months from the first time we fed them food to I'm praying with her for her dad. So it's example, again, of the long game, the long haul, of being invested into people's lives and loving them no matter what. And so as we wrap up our time, I know chapel gets over in about 10 minutes. I just want to challenge you a little bit, because I'm assuming that you're here because you love Jesus and you have some call to ministry, right? To me, this is a different environment than when I'm speaking at a church, because in a church, people are people. They're learning about Jesus. They're all over the place, and I know you're all in different places here as well, but you're here because you're responding to something God is doing inside. And I want to ask you today to think about, who is it that grips your heart? Who is it that grips your heart? Now, you may have entered into Bible college like me because you love Jesus and you want to offer yourself to be used by Jesus. And that's awesome, and that's first steps, and that's incredible. But somewhere along the lines, God has to grip our heart. We have to fall in love with people in general or a people group. And so I hear a lot of times, well, who grips your heart? And you're like, the lost. And I'm going to ask you, which lost? Who? Specifically. Let the question sink in. Because it matters when you're going to ministry that God's directing you towards the people that grip your heart. Otherwise, ministry becomes a profession. And some of you are going to earn your livelihood from ministry, and that's nothing wrong with that. But we don't treat people from a professional standpoint. We're loving people. We're introducing them to Jesus, and we're his ambassadors. And Christ loved people where they were at. They knew they loved him. That's why sinners loved to be around him, because even though he was like, hey, that's sin, they knew he loved them. And they wanted to be around him. So it's an important question, because when you love, you will go anywhere. You will do anything. You will sacrifice to see people come to know Jesus that you love. Love will compel you. Love will compel you to go outside the norms of your environment, which is what has happened to us. My entire life, I'm 52 years old. My mom got saved when I was 2. So for 50 years, I've been in the church and loved it. The church was my second home. Church folks loved on us. My mom was a single parent. They cared for us. I was discipled. I fell in love with Jesus in the church. I love the church. But when the love of hikers gripped my heart and I realized they won't come to the place I love, I'm going to have to leave the place I love to go to them, because I love them. They need to see Jesus. And love compels me to, maybe my methods are a little different now. Not that there's anything wrong with the methods of a traditional church, but it's the message that's important. It's their relationship with Jesus Christ that's important. And so only me loving them will compel me to get out of my own norms and love them in a way they need to be loved. It's a love for Christ. It's a love for people. In my church culture, again, I said there's nothing wrong. It was a come and see culture. We've built all this. Come and see the goodness of our God. But God is also looking for those who will go and show. Will you go and show who I am? It's not a either or. It's another approach to ministry. It's not that one is better than the other. And God, for us, has called us to go and to show. And I want to challenge you. There are creative ways for you to introduce people to Jesus and to disciple them. There are creative ways to introduce people to Jesus and disciple them. And it's not manipulation, and it's not we're trying to be creative to get them like some sort of bait and switch or hook or any of those kinds of things. It's that love compels. Love compels. You see, I see Jesus, in both the synagogue and Samaria. Right? We see Jesus in the synagogues teaching the Jewish folks and whatnot of the day, and then we see Jesus going through Samaria and sitting by a well. Two totally different approaches, two totally different methods. And the people in the synagogue did not like the fact that he was talking to the woman in Samaria. And the woman in Samaria probably didn't like the fact that he was from the synagogue, because she's like, your people say we worship on this mountain, and she gets in and he's like, that's not why I'm here. And my challenge to you today is, as you loving after Jesus, and you're finding the people that God's called you to. There's all kinds of different people groups, from different races to different cultures to subcultures to people who've been broken by society a certain way. It's you know, you all are part of some other culture outside of the church culture. Who is gripping your heart? You see, I believe that God is raising up people who love deeply, who love not only Him, but who love others as well. And from my time in worship this morning and time being here, I believe that you guys are those people. I believe that God's leading you and teaching you how to love deeply. That it's not about a form or this or that. It's about serving Jesus well, about enjoying Him, about learning and being made in His image, but then bringing that to others. And I want to tell you today that we have found it's powerful, and it's a fresh of breath air to the non-believer. When you stand as a representative of Jesus Christ, you live righteously and love them purely. They don't know what to do with it. They just don't know what to do with it. They've never seen everything they've been told about Christians, everything that's been politicized or any of those kinds of pieces are like, yeah, but you're not like the ones I've seen on TV or that I've heard about. I'm like, no, that's right, because I'm a follower of Jesus. Jesus loves me. I love Jesus. And because of that, I love you too. And I demonstrate it in tangible ways. Man, if you'll live your life that way, God will direct you to folks who seem unreachable, who are guarded, who are hurt, who are all over this world. And that's what God's opened up to us. And so I'm just going to take the next 2 minutes just to pray for you. Because God's called you to an amazing journey. I have served Jesus. I gave my life to Him at a youth retreat when I was 13 years old. Felt a call to ministry at 17. Like I told you, I didn't want to be poor. So I just went and started working, but always in church, loving my church. And then finally, God was like, hey, okay, 10 years is a long time to be running from me. When are you going to really show you love me and obey me? Grabbed my heart. Been serving Jesus ever since. Not burned out. Feel like just gaining traction. That's what God wants. He's calling you for a life of loving Him and serving Him. And so, man, love Jesus passionately. And if people haven't gripped your heart, if you're like, man, I'd love ministry if it weren't for the people, I hate that statement. Because ministry is the people. Ministry is not guitar playing. Ministry is not sermon development. Ministry is not building buildings that we can meet in. Ministry is people. And all the other stuff is to help facilitate people. And so my prayer, I'm going to pray for you here, and that God would highlight in your life, who is it that grips your heart? Like, man, I just love these people when I'm around them. I just love this environment. And it may seem foreign to you. Like, the breakthrough for me was like, how in the world can I bring Jesus to the trail when they don't want to come to church? I bet you there's some people like that in your life. Or people that you engage with some way, shape, or form. You game with, or you hang out with, or you listen to music with, or whatever you do. Like, man, they won't come to church, but I would love for them to know Jesus. That's your people. Heavenly Father, I thank you this day that in this room there's a collective of people who love you, who have committed to serve you with their life. And Lord, I pray, Lord, today that you would, if they haven't already, that you would grip their heart with someone or some people group that they just can't let go of. And that, Lord, that love would compel them to go wherever you lead them, to do whatever you ask them to do, to help them sacrifice willingly and cheerfully because they love the people you're sending them to. And those could be church people, and those could be non-church people. It could be people all over this world. But Lord, may you grip our heart for the people you've assigned to us. And then may we be faithful to follow you and love you into the dark places where we may be the only light. We thank you, Lord. We offer you who we are for your services. In your precious name, amen.